Thank you for the introduction. This is my first RevX, so nice to see everyone. Good to see some familiar faces as well. I'm going to cover the conflicting forces that we're dealing with when we build AI solutions and how to manage them. And I'm going to start with this premise. Like, if you're involved in building AI solutions or governing them, there's no doubt that you live in a world of chaos. And that's kind of the theme of my presentation, how to manage chaos. So this chaos is created by disorder. It's created by randomness, uncertainty, and instability from external and internal sources. And there's a large number of both of what I'll call positive chaos and some challenging chaos. So let's look at the opportunity side of chaos. A lot of this information came from the Stanford AI report. If you haven't read the 468-page document, I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of good information in there. Corporate investment reached $252 billion in 2024, and that was a 13-fold increase from 2014. If you look at Gen AI, it grew 44% in the last year and reached $34 billion, which was 8.5 times more growth than in investment than in 2022. And really what you see here is you see money chasing opportunity. And what's going to follow, of course, is a massive deluge of projects. I was kind of surprised by this. There were 1,500 projects in 2016, and there were 4.3 million AI projects in 2024. This is from GitHub, and it's a proxy for the growth and how people are using AI. I think 2.3 million of them are probably abandoned and not working, but still, it's huge, huge growth, right? Who's following this growth is people. This was kind of another shocking statistics. So less than 150 students graduated from MBA programs in AI in 2016, and 935 graduated in 2024. And when I saw the statistic, I had to look and see, do they mean 1,000 or 100 or some metric? But no, they mean 935. And so what that tells me is that there's a huge war for talent, that there's not enough talent coming out of institutions, and that we really need to focus on upskilling our talent. There's some other challenges. Thomas mentioned 63% of companies tell us that keeping up with this pace of innovation is a significant challenge. I'm not sure if the other 37% mastered it or they just didn't answer, but certainly we're all struggling with this. Let's look at some of the challenges. Everybody knows regulation's growing. There are different statistics presented about it. In this case, if you look at 75 countries, it's grown 9-fold since 2016. So in 2016, 1 regulation was passed in a state in America. In 2023, 49 were passed, and 131 were passed in 2024. So this is a rapidly changing, very complex thing to manage. Next thing that's happened is that the number of AI incident reports continue to grow. And there were 233 reported last year, which was a 56% increase, right? So you're seeing this increase in adoption, now you're seeing an increase in incidents. I think embedded in this is another problem, and that really surprised me as well, is that hallucination is getting worse in some instances. So there's this test called a simple QA test. If you put ChatGPT versions through it, if you put 01, 03, and 04 through it, the hallucination was 44%, 51%, and 79% respectively. So it actually is getting worse as they're improving the models. And of course, we know the models aren't tuned for a single test, but it's still in the 4 to 12% range. And so managing these issues is complex and challenging, I think, for everyone involved. If you look at our research as well, you'll see that 63% of companies say they have an insufficient budget for AI governance, which is going to create an issue. 60% cite misaligned governance processes, and 58% cite lack of leadership accountability related to these issues. So it's this really tough thing, right? We have these incredible opportunities, but we also have these incredible challenges. Okay, I just want to check and see if everyone had a cup of coffee. So everyone had some form of caffeine? Okay. All right, we're going to discuss entropy theory and its implications for AI development, okay? So here's a little history. In 1824, a French engineer, Sade Carnot, was trying to improve the efficiency of engines. And what he realized, and he wrote a 118-page book on it, that you could not get a perfectly efficient steam engine. Something was always lost through friction, vibration, heat, something like that. And for us, I think about like what's lost when we have redundant experiments and duplicative feature engineering, right? So his book sort of explored the beginnings of entropy, and then along came Rudolf Clausius, and he formalized the concept entropy, and he also formed the first and second laws of thermodynamics. What he found is that systems naturally drift towards disorder. And in our world, we know that without good governance, AI model development drifts towards disorder, data drifts towards disorder, we get inconsistent quality, we get higher risk exposure, right? 100 years later, Claude Shannon is trying to improve communication between Churchill and Roosevelt. And he's trying to figure out how to reduce confusion in the messages that are being sent. So he took thermodynamic entropy and converted it to information entropy. And when he did that, he realized that information with clear patterns and built-in redundancy is a lot more clear. So I think in our situation, how do we see information entropy? We see it in our data, right? It's noisy, it's messy. We see it across different parts of the AI development lifecycle where we lose information along the way. And so adding to all these things, this scientist Carlo Rovelli pointed out that macro views hide micro problems. And so what's the problem? So if you think about it, when you see oil and water separate in a jar, it looks like order is being restored. But what's actually happening is the molecules are becoming more disordered. And so I think the takeaway that applies to us is that, we really have to dig in to find the entropy in our AI development lifecycle and our systems before we can fix it, right? We can't just look at a high level and say, that team's okay, that process is okay. So let's dig in just a little bit deeper on how entropy applies to the AI lifecycle. You're going to see some entropy in a second. At each step of our life cycle, right, organizations have a choice. They can minimize entropy or build or ignore it and let it build and compound. What I recommend is we put it through structured systems with freedom of choice bounded by standardized guardrails. So I'm going to walk through a high entropy model development process very quickly. So first, you have misaligned goals that create confusion between data scientists and the business units. You have disjointed data sources, and what these do is they corrupt trust and slow progress. We have a lack of standards across the enterprise that leads to fragile pipelines. We have a bunch of ad hoc modeling approaches that make reuse painful and slow. Model validation is often iterative. Why is it iterative? Because it's done in serial, not in parallel at the beginning and end of the process, and a lot of things happen along the way, and that creates a lot of rework. We have reactive monitoring, and that means issues are caught too late, and those can have tremendous consequences. So what happens is these fractured workflows working through the process start to compound entropy. And these lead to delays, it creates technical debt, there's compliance risk, and there's outright failure. So is this a likely scenario? Is this what we look like when we see our reports on how things are going? So from our research, from the report that Thomas cited, 51% of companies report fragmented AI tooling across teams and development departments. 56% say they lack effective mechanisms to collaborate. 60% call out rising operational costs as a major barrier to scale. So it's real, it's a problem. Should we kill entropy? Should we make it our focus to kill entropy and stop it? And the answer is no. And it's wild why. I didn't know this until I researched this. If you had a system that could track every particle for everything in the universe, and you knew exactly where everything was going to be at once, entropy would remain constant because no information would be gained or lost. But time would literally stand still. There would be no beginning, there'd be no end, there'd be no progress, because it turns out, for reasons I don't have the detail on, that without entropy, time cannot move forward. And I'm sure there's someone in the room who majored in physics who can tell us all about it at happy hour. But with this concept, right, that time cannot move forward without entropy, I'm going to coin this phrase as what we actually need to do is orchestrate managed disruption. And we need to reduce our entropy. So let's look at a well-orchestrated AI lifecycle. It has aligned goals. They're tied directly to the business outcomes. It has clear provenance of data and feature stores, and that ensures trust and reuse. It has transparent experimentation frameworks, foster agility. Has embedded governance and validation checks all along the process. That brings speed, that brings scalability, that brings governance control. And it has integrated deployment pipelines and automated monitoring systems. So structured entropy management doesn't just reduce risk, it builds institutional intelligence. And that compounds into speed, that compounds into reliability and strategic advantage. And there's this quote by Sir Arthur Stanley Eddington, and he said, "Entropy is inevitable, but direction is optional." And I really like that quote, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is produce some direction. So I'm going to offer 3 things that I think can help us manage all this chaos and entropy. The first one will come as a shock. You're going to need a centralized, unified MLOps platform. It doesn't have to be ours, but should, but you're going to need one. And the problem is you have all this complexity happening, right? You have tremendous change. You have tremendous change in the types of models and technology and amount of models and rules and regulations. So without some guiding principle to hold it all together, it's going to become a very inefficient system. And I think when you look at it from data prep to monitoring, such a platform needs collaboration early and often, right? It needs policy and process standards at every stage to minimize arbitrary uniqueness and inefficiency and redundancy. And I think what you can do is have these systems that allow you to have guardrails without slowing down the work. Next, I think one of the things that we're really looking at is the best practice going forward is to embed risk management and governance into your processes. So right now, if you look at model risk management in most organizations, it's serial and stepped at the beginning and at the end of the process. And what people are finding is that if they embedded into each stage of the process, it will minimize rework, it will enable transparency and explainability, and it really lets you scale, because what's a barrier to scale for model risk management is that it's not embedded throughout the life cycle, but since it occurs at the end, the rework cycle, and the delay in the ability for the model risk managers to literally do the validation is caused by the issues of it being stuck in this long process where they don't see the model until you show up for validation, and then it's not right? And then finally, I'd say, and this comes from McKinsey, and this comes from a couple of other sources, you need a hybrid organizational model, and this has to be led by the C-suite. So what I'm advocating and what they're advocating is centralized policy and decentralized execution. Right? So your centralized policy sort of means that all the guardrails are in place, a centralized body makes all the governance decisions, they make all the rules and policies and procedures. But the teams are decentralized. The teams doing the work are able to do what they need to do to create this disruption and entropy that we need to create innovation and speed and value from AI. And so while they have the freedom of choice and tools, they have the boundaries, right, of these rules and regulations and policies that the central organization has provided. One other thing about this, and this has come up in many studies, is that if you're going to do massive AI transformation, the C-suite has to be involved. There are a lot of department level initiatives, but this really requires enterprise transformation. It requires huge budgets. It requires reorganization. And so what the findings are is that companies who don't do this from the C-suite eventually fail and have long delays in bringing AI solutions to light. So I guess in summary, in a world where ambition is high, regulation is complex, and internal processes are fragmented, entropy is inevitable. What we need to do is manage this entropy and realize it's not the enemy. So a well-managed, thorough, united platform, embedded governments will empower teams, and it will lower entropy, which will make it a source of clarity, trust, and speed. So by embracing this mindset of managed disruption, we don't eliminate the chaos, we orchestrate it, and we can use it for competitive advantage. So that's my theory of entropy.